Imagine waking up tomorrow morning in a world where the fundamental rules of reality just constantly change.
Without a single word of warning.
Right, completely unannounced. The authority figures who run your life, so your boss, your government, your teachers, they're completely irrational.
Just throwing violent tantrums at the drop of a hat.
Over things that make absolutely no sense, and the goals you're desperately trying to reach literally get up and walk away from you the moment you get close.
Which is incredibly frustrating just to think about.
It really is. And to make matters worse, your own body won't stop shifting sizes.
Yeah.
One minute you're this towering giant knocking your head against the ceiling, and the next you're so incredibly small that you are actively drowning in a puddle of your own tears.
Yeah.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are asking you to step through the looking glass.
It's a profoundly unsettling scenario to picture, isn't it?
Right.
I mean, if you describe that to a psychologist today, they might diagnose you with severe anxiety or, a dissociative disorder.
Oh, absolutely.
But for millions of readers over the past century and a half, that exact scenario hasn't just been a nightmare. It's felt strangely, uncomfortably familiar.
Because it resonates.
Exactly. It captures the chaotic essence of just navigating life.
Which is exactly why we're looking at such a fascinating stack of sources today. We're pulling from a really rich biographical excerpt detailing the highly enigmatic life of Charles Lutwidge Dodgson.
A man you almost certainly know better by his famous pseudonym.
Lewis Carroll.
Right.
Alongside that, we have the complete original text of his undeniable masterpiece, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. And to make things even more interesting, we are looking at a contemporary essay exploring the nightmare of translating Carroll's deeply English wordplay into other languages.
Specifically focusing on a brilliant Spanish translation.
Right. Bringing the translation essay into the mix is, I think, a great move for us.
It highlights something crucial. The chaos of Wonderland isn't just in the events of the story, it is embedded in the very language itself. On one hand, you have the strictly ordered, almost painfully rigid Victorian reality that Charles Dodgson inhabited in his day-to-day life. And on the other, you have the anarchic, nonsense-filled dreamscape of Wonderland that Lewis Carroll created.
Those two worlds couldn't be more opposed.
Not at all.
So, here is our mission for this deep dive. We're going to explore that stark contrast. But we aren't just going to summarize a story you probably already know from childhood.
No, we're going a lot deeper than that.
They are. We're going to guide you through the psychological underpinnings of this bizarre, beloved tale to uncover what it actually reveals about identity, the absurdity of adult rules, and how we navigate chaotic, broken systems in our own modern lives.
Because let's be honest, we've all had days, or entire years, really, where we feel like we've fallen down a rabbit hole and nothing makes sense anymore.
We certainly have.
And to truly understand the architecture of Wonderland, we first have to understand the architect of that chaos.
The man behind the pseudonym.
Exactly. Because the world he grew up in provides the exact blueprint for what he was rebelling against.
Let's get right into the biography then. Charles Lutwidge Dodgson, born in 1832 in Daresbury, Cheshire. He was born into what the sources describe as a very conservative, high church Anglican family. He was the eldest boy of 11 children. And here's a wild statistic for the 1830s. All 11 children survived to adulthood. 7 girls, 4 boys.
Which is just a staggering statistical anomaly for the Victorian era.
Yeah, infant mortality was so high back then.
Immensely high.
Yeah.
So having 11 children survive meant he grew up in a very crowded, bustling, but highly supervised household.
Oh.
The environment itself was deeply structured by tradition.
Right.
His ancestors were mostly from the north of England, with some Irish connections, and they were firmly entrenched in the two classic, unshakable professions of the English upper middle class.
The army and the church.
Precisely.
There's a real heavy weight of legacy there. I mean, his great-grandfather was named Charles Dodgson, his grandfather, another Charles, his father, the eldest, also Charles.
It's a lineage of strict tradition.
You are Charles IV, essentially, and you are expected to fall in line.
Yeah.
His father actually had a brilliant mind for mathematics and secured a double degree at Christ Church, Oxford. He could have had a stellar academic career, pushing the boundaries of math, but instead, he married his cousin in 1827 and became a rural parish priest.
And Dodgson Sr. was quite ambitious within that church hierarchy. He published sermons, he translated the works of Tertullian.
Let's pause there for a second because translating Tertullian sounds incredibly dry to anyone who isn't a Victorian theology scholar.
It really does.
Who was Tertullian, and why does it matter that Dodgson's dad was obsessed with him?
That's a vital piece of context.
Yeah.
So Tertullian was an early Christian author from Carthage working around the 2nd century.
Okay.
He was known for being extremely strict, highly moralistic, and completely uncompromising. He wrote extensively about discipline, modesty, and the absolute necessity of adhering to orthodox dogma.
Wow.
So Dodgson's father isn't just a casual priest. He is immersing himself in the writings of one of the most severe, rule-bound figures in early Christianity.
That sets quite a tone for the household.
He does. He became the archdeacon of Ripon Cathedral and was deeply involved in the passionate theological debates dividing the Church of England at the time. He was a staunch conservative and Anglo-Catholic who admired John Henry Newman and the Tractarian movement.
Another dense historical term there. For those of us not brushed up on 19th century church politics, what exactly was the Tractarian movement?
Essentially, it was a massive, highly controversial push by certain Oxford scholars to bring old, rigid, highly formalized Catholic rituals and doctrines back into the Church of England.
Okay.
It was a movement that loved hierarchy, mystery, and absolute submission to church authority. It was a very strict, dogmatic way of looking at the world where every single action had a moral consequence.
Everything had to mean something.
Right. And Dodson Sr. worked incredibly hard to instill these rigid, highly structured worldviews into his 11 children.
So young Charles is growing up in a house where duty, moral purity, and intellectual rigor are basically the oxygen.
Exactly.
He's educated at home initially, and the family kept lists of his reading, which shows just how precocious he was. At 7 years old, he was reading The Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan.
Which is not an easy read.
Not at all. For anyone who hasn't read it, that is a dense, heavy, allegorical text about a man literally burdened by sin trying to reach heaven. Not exactly light, breezy reading for what we'd consider a first grader today.
No, definitely not.
But reading the source material, it's clear his childhood wasn't just a series of intellectual triumphs. He faced significant physical and social challenges that really isolated him.
He did. He suffered from a severe stutter, which his family very delicately referred to as a hesitation.
It's a hesitation.
Yeah, that stutter deeply hindered his social interactions throughout his entire life, especially with other adults. He was also deaf in his right ear due to a childhood illness.
Oh, wow.
There were even rumors that he suffered trauma from being forced to counteract his natural left-handedness.
Did that actually happen?
Well, the biography notes, there isn't hard documentary evidence for that specific claim about being left-handed, but it fits the broader theme of his life. A natural impulse being forcefully corrected to fit a rigid standard.
That makes a lot of sense. What there is absolute concrete evidence for, though, is his profound unhappiness when he was finally sent away to school.
Yes.
At 12, he went to a private school in Richmond and seemed to do okay. But in 1845, he transferred to the famous rugby school. Academically, he was brilliant. His math teacher, R.B. Mayer, said he hadn't known a more promising boy since coming to rugby.
But personally,
The sources say he was utterly miserable.
the contrast between his academic success and his internal suffering at rugby is so stark. Years after leaving, he wrote a reflection on his time there that is incredibly chilling.
What did he say?
He wrote that for nothing in this world would he live those 3 years again. And then he added a very cryptic, highly analyzed line. He said that if he had been safe from the nighttime annoyance, the harshness of the daytime life would have been, by comparison, much more bearable.
The nighttime annoyance. I have to push back on the delicacy of that phrasing. Is that just a Victorian euphemism for typical boarding school bullying, or are historians pointing to something darker?
Most historians and biographers agree it's pointing to something significantly darker. The source material notes that historians speculate this delicate phrasing likely refers to some form of sexual abuse or extreme institutionalized bullying and hazing in the dormitories.
That's horrifying.
The Victorian public school system was notoriously brutal. It operated on a strict hierarchy where older boys had immense, unchecked power over younger ones.
Right.
It is heartbreaking to think about this brilliant, physically slight, stuttering boy enduring that kind of silent suffering, unable to communicate his trauma because the social rules of the time demanded a stiff upper lip.
That paints such a complex psychological portrait. You have this young man living in a world of strict Victorian morality, religious dogmatism, and intense academic pressure, while simultaneously navigating a deeply hostile social environment, hidden trauma, and personal physical limitations.
And his just keep coming.
They do. He eventually leaves Rugby, goes to Christchurch, Oxford, his father's old college, carrying all that expectation. And just 2 days after he arrives, his mother dies of what they called inflammation of the brain, likely meningitis. She was only 47.
It is a staggering amount of sudden loss and rigid structure to navigate for a young man.
Yeah.
He stays at Oxford, and he becomes a brilliant mathematician, a published logician, an ordained Anglican deacon, and even an early pioneer of photography. The source actually includes a wonderful image of him meticulously cleaning the lens of his camera, taken by Oscar Gustav Reslander.
I'm looking at that photo from the source right now.
He lived his entire adult life in a world of formulas, darkrooms, and dogma.
He looks so incredibly serious in the picture, buttoned up, intense, surrounded by the mechanical precision of early photography. Mathematics and logic seem like the ultimate safe havens for someone whose life felt out of control.
That's a great way to put it.
In a math equation, the rules do not arbitrarily change. A plus B always equals C. Nobody changes the rules of geometry just to bully you.
That is the crucial insight here. He inhabited a professionally and personally ordered world to protect himself, but of course you have these darker speculations that have attached themselves to his legacy over the years.
Largely because people can't reconcile the man with the art.
Exactly.
Right, the biography touches on these, the wild rumors that he must have consumed heavy psychedelics or narcotics to come up with his surreal stories, or the bizarre fringe theories that he might have been Jack the Ripper.
Which honestly sounds like something a Reddit thread would invent today.
It totally does.
And it's fascinating, not because those theories hold any historical weight, they absolutely do not, but because they reveal how deeply uncomfortable society is with duality.
What do you mean by that?
Well, people look at the surreal, mind-bending, fiercely anarchic art of Alice in Wonderland, and they cannot reconcile it with the buttoned-up, stuttering math deacon who took photos of church architecture.
Right, the two sides don't seem to match.
So they project dark, sensational theories onto him to explain the gap. They think he must have been high on opium, or he must have been a secret serial killer.
But the truth is much more profound than a sensational true crime podcast theory.
Considerably more profound. The escapism of his writing wasn't born of narcotics. It was born of a desperate, brilliant need to invert the suffocating rules of the reality he was forced to inhabit.
Wow.
He took all the logic, all the math, all the Victorian manners he was chained to, and he systematically broke them on paper.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this deep dive? It means that when we look at Alice in Wonderland, we aren't just looking at a silly, whimsical children's story about talking animals.
Not at all.
We are looking at the ultimate rebellion of a fiercely logical mind against a fundamentally illogical, hypocritical world. So with that framework in place, let's take that plunge. Let's go down the rabbit hole.
Let's do it. It all begins with a feeling we are all intimately familiar with. Profound boredom.
The worst.
Alice is sitting on the riverbank with her sister, looking at a book her sister is reading that has no pictures or conversations. And what is the use of a book, thought Alice, without pictures or conversations?
It's the perfect, subtle setup.
It is. She is rejecting the dry, didactic, joyless Victorian world right from the opening paragraph.
And then the catalyst arrives. A white rabbit with pink eyes runs by. Now, a rabbit in a field isn't strange. A rabbit talking to itself, saying, oh dear, I should be late," is a bit strange, but Alice initially accepts it.
She just sort of rolls with it.
Yeah. It's only when the rabbit pulls an actual pocket watch out of its waistcoat that Alice jumps up, burning with curiosity. She chases it across the meadow, follows it down a large rabbit hole under the hedge, and, crucially, she doesn't even stop for a second to consider how she will get out again.
The descent itself is where the genius of Carroll's subversion really takes hold. We all know the trope of falling down the rabbit hole, but look closely at how she falls in the text.
It's so weird.
The tunnel dips suddenly, and Alice finds herself falling down what seems to be a very deep well. But she isn't terrified. She isn't screaming.
Right.
She is falling so slowly that she has plenty of time to look around. And what does she see? The walls of the well are covered in cupboards and bookshelves. There are maps and pictures hung upon pegs.
She even grabs a jar off a shelf as she falls. The label says orange marmalade, but to her great disappointment, it is completely empty. She manages to place it into another cupboard as she falls past it, specifically so she doesn't drop it and kill somebody below.
It is a masterful juxtaposition. She is experiencing the ultimate loss of physical control, a literal free fall into the unknown. But the environment itself is heavily domesticated. Bookshelves, maps, and marmalade.
It's chaotic but cozy.
Exactly. Carroll is telling us that the descent into chaos isn't always marked by screaming and fire. Sometimes it's just a slow, surreal realization that the ground you used to stand on is simply gone, but the mundane artifacts of your old life are still floating around you.
Connect this to the bigger picture for a moment. Think about a time in your life when you fell into a massive transition. Maybe you were thrust into a completely new industry or a sudden, unexpected life change.
Yeah, we've all been there.
You're in free fall, the old rules don't apply anymore, but you're still trying to neatly put the marmalade jar back on the shelf. You're trying to apply your old, orderly, polite habits to a completely chaotic new reality.
That's a great comparison.
Alice is falling, doing math out loud, trying to calculate her latitude and longitude, wondering if she'll fall right through the earth to the antipodes. She meant antipodes, of course.
She is desperately clinging to her rote education to soothe her existential anxiety. She even starts wondering if cats eat bats or if bats eat cats. And since she can't answer either question, she realizes it doesn't matter which way she asks it.
The logic is breaking down.
The logic she relies on is breaking down before she even hits the bottom.
And when she does hit the bottom thump onto a heap of sticks and dry leaves, she is unhurt. She chases the white rabbit into a long, low hall lit by hanging lamps. But the rabbit vanishes, and she is left in a hall with locked doors all around.
A classic locked room scenario.
She finds a solid glass table with a tiny golden key on it. The key opens a tiny door, maybe 20 centimeters high, hidden behind a curtain. And through that door, she sees the most beautiful garden imaginable. But she can't even fit her head through the doorway.
This is the beginning of her physical instability and the profound existential dread that comes with it. She wants to be in a garden, but she is fundamentally the wrong size.
Which is such a relatable feeling.
How many of us have felt exactly that? You see the goal, you see the beautiful garden, the promotion, the relationship, the creative success, but you feel like you simply don't fit the requirements to get there.
You're too big, too small, too inexperienced, too overqualified.
Exactly.
So she goes back to the table and finds a little bottle that definitely was not there before. Tied around its neck is a paper label with the words "Drink Me" beautifully printed in large letters.
Very inviting.
Alice is cautious, though. She specifically checks to see if it's marked poison, explicitly remembering the didactic stories of children getting burned or eaten by wild beasts simply because they didn't remember the simple rules their elders taught them.
That is Carroll taking a direct jab at the moralistic literature forced upon Victorian children, which we will see a lot more of later. But it's not marked poison, so she tastes it.
And what a taste.
It has a flavor that is a mix of cherry tart, custard, pineapple, roast turkey, toffee, and hot butter toast.
Sounds amazing.
She finishes it off and immediately shrinks down to 25 centimeters.
She is thrilled. She is finally the right size for the garden. But when she gets to the door, she realizes she left the golden key up on the glass table.
Oh.
She can see it through the glass, but she can't climb the slippery glass legs to reach it. She sits down and cries. She actually scolds herself, telling herself to stop crying immediately. The source text notes she generally gave herself very good advice, though she very seldom followed it.
Don't we all?
Sometimes scolding herself so severely it brought tears to her eyes. She even remembered trying to box her own ears once for cheating herself in a game of croquet she was playing against herself.
That psychological detail from Carroll is so fascinating. This curious child was very fond of pretending to be two people, the text says. But now, she thinks, what is the use of pretending to be two people when there is hardly enough of her left to make one respectable person?
Wow.
Her physical shrinking is directly mirroring a shrinking of her sense of self. When our external reality diminishes our agency, our internal sense of identity often shrinks right along with it.
Then she finds a little glass box under the table. Inside is a very small cake with the words "Eat me" beautifully marked in currants. She eats it, hoping it will make her grow. At first, she holds her hand on top of her head to feel which way she's growing, and is quite surprised to find she remains the same size.
But then
the magical logic kicks in.
Curiouser and curiouser, she cries. She is so surprised she literally forgets how to speak good English. She shoots up to over 2 meters tall. Her head strikes the ceiling.
She grabs the golden key, but now she is a giant. She can only lie on the floor and look through the tiny door with one eye. The garden is further away than ever because now she is monstrously large.
It's just constant whiplash.
She sits down and begins to cry again, shedding gallons of tears until there is a large pool all around her, 10 centimeters deep. Think about that imagery for a second. She is literally creating an ocean of her own sorrow and frustration simply because she cannot stabilize her physical reality to match her desires.
And this leads to the core psychological crisis of the story. The White Rabbit trots by, drops his kid gloves and fan in a panic, and Alice picks up the fan. As she fans herself, she starts to shrink again. But more importantly, she begins to question her fundamental identity.
Yeah.
She asks a profound question. Was I the same when I got up this morning? I almost think I can remember feeling a little different. But if I'm not the same, the next question is, who in the world am I? That's the great puzzle.
I love how she tries to solve this puzzle. She tries to figure out who she is by testing her knowledge. She tries multiplication tables. 4 times 5 is 12. 4 times 6 is 13. She tries geography. London is the capital of Paris, and Paris is the capital of Rome.
It's all completely wrong.
She tries to recite a moralistic poem about the industrious bee, and instead it comes out as a poem about a hypocritical, smiling crocodile welcoming little fishes into its gently smiling jaws.
Her knowledge, the rigid, rote Victorian education she was given, the exact kind Dodson was subjected to, is completely failing her in a chaotic system.
It's useless down there.
Exactly. And because her education is failing her, she assumes she must have turned into her friend Mabel, who knows such a very little. It's a brilliant commentary on how we tie our entire sense of self-worth to our accumulation of facts and status.
That's a great point.
When the rules of the environment change, those facts become useless, and we experience a profound crisis of identity. If I am no longer the person who knows the right answers, then who am I?
Escaping that identity crisis leads her to an encounter that perfectly encapsulates how useless our assumptions are in new environments. She shrinks so much from fanning herself that she falls into her own pool of tears. She thinks she's fallen into the sea, but realizes it's the tears she wept when she was a giant.
And then she meets the mouse.
She meets a mouse swimming in the pool. Trying to be polite, she uses the first sentence from her French lesson book. "Où ma chatte? Where is my cat?"
Which is perhaps the greatest literary masterclass in failing to read the room.
It really is. The mouse leaps out of the water, quivering with terror. Alice apologizes, but then immediately starts talking about how wonderful her cat, Dina, is at catching mice.
Just making it worse.
Then, trying to change the subject, she asks if the mouse likes dogs and proceeds to describe a lovely little terrier that is excellent at killing rats. The mouse swims away in a furious commotion.
Let's unpack the social dynamic here, because it's a very sharp critique of privilege. Alice is relying entirely on her own frame of reference without considering for a second the perspective or the lived reality of the creature she's talking to.
She's just oblivious.
She assumes her pets are universally wonderful, completely blind to the fact that they are apex predators to the mouse. She is walking into someone else's environment and completely ignoring their reality, assuming her upper-middle-class English way of life is the only correct one.
Eventually, a whole party of animals gathers on the bank, soaking wet from the pool of tears. A duck, a dodo, a lory, an eaglet. They need to get dry. And the mouse, who seems to have some authority, says he knows the driest thing ever.
And what is that?
He proceeds to recite a mind-numbingly boring history lesson about William the Conqueror and the Earls of Mercia and Northumbria.
The irony there is so layered. The mouse uses dry, factual history to literally dry them off. But Alice points out she is still soaking wet. The historical facts have absolutely no practical application to their current crisis.
None at all.
So the dodo proposes a caucus race.
This might be one of my favorite scenes. Let's dissect the caucus race. The dodo marks out a course, sort of a circle, though he says the exact shape doesn't matter. There is no 1, 2, 3 in a way. Everyone just begins running when they like and leaves off when they like.
Chaos.
After half an hour of this chaotic running, the dodo suddenly calls out, "The race is over!" They all pant and ask, "But who has won?" The dodo thinks for a long time, sitting with one finger pressed to his forehead, and finally says, "Everybody has won, and all must have prizes."
Dodgson is taking a massive swing at political and bureaucratic systems here. A caucus is, historically, a political meeting to decide a candidate or policy. In the Victorian era, these were notoriously convoluted.
Just people talking in circles.
The animals run in circles. No one really knows when it starts or ends. There are no clear rules. And at the end, everyone claims victory and demands a prize. It perfectly encapsulates modern corporate busywork.
Oh, absolutely.
Have you ever been part of a quarterly review meeting where everyone talks in circles, produces a massive slide deck, nothing actually gets decided, but everyone expects a bonus at the end? That is a caucus race. Motion is completely confused with progress.
And the detail about the prizes is the cherry on top.
Hmm.
Who provides the prizes? Alice. She has to dig into her own pocket, find a box of comfits, and hand them out. When it's her turn for a prize, the dodo asks what else she has.
She just has a thimble.
She has a thimble. The dodo takes the thimble and formally presents it back to her with a pompous speech.
It is the ultimate hollow corporate award. You give an institution your time, your energy, and your resources, and they hand you back your own thimble, put a certificate around it, and expect you to be grateful.
It's so insulting when you think about it.
Alice thinks it's all completely absurd, but they all look so incredibly grave and serious that she doesn't dare laugh.
That reverence for absurdity brings us to a fascinating detour in our source stack. We mentioned earlier that we have an essay exploring how translators tackle Carroll's work. Let's look at how the absurdity of education and knowledge is handled later in the book when Alice meets the mock turtle, because looking at the Spanish translation actually reveals the sheer depth of Carroll's English wordplay.
That's right. Translating Alice is famously considered a nightmare because so much of the humor is based on puns of the Victorian English school curriculum.
It just doesn't translate literally.
A literal translation would make no sense to a child in Spain or Japan. The translators have to invent entirely new jokes that carry the same spirit of mocking authority and education.
So the mock turtle is telling Alice about his education at the bottom of the sea. In English, he says he learned reeling and writhing instead of reading and writing. But in the Spanish text we are examining, the curriculum is completely reinvented.
What do they use?
The mock turtle says they learned Hysteria antigua y moderna, hysteria ancient and modern, a clear, brilliant pun on history. Then Mariographia, a pun combining geography with the or perhaps seasickness, Mario.
And my personal favorite from that Spanish source is feificar, which translates to uglification. Alice says she's never heard of uglification. The Gruffin is shocked, asking if she knows what it means to beautify. She must be a simpleton not to know what uglification is.
It's so clever.
And of course the classic languages. Patin y riego skate and watering, which is a phonetic pun on Latin and Greek. The translator had to completely rebuild the linguistic architecture to maintain the chaos.
Alice asks how many hours a day the lessons were. The mock turtle says 10 hours the first day, 9 the next, and so on. Alice points out that's a curious plan. In English, the Griffin explains that's the reason they're called lessons, because they lessen from day to day.
The pun works so well.
In the Spanish text, it's translated as cursos because they accordion, they shorten. It is brilliant linguistic acrobatics. The core philosophy remains. The more you are educated in this rigid system, the less you actually receive. It's an educational system that diminishes you.
And this diminishing effect of adult rules brings us back to Alice's journey, specifically her encounter with the Duchess. This is perhaps Carroll's most pointed critique of Victorian parenting and children's literature.
Right. Escaping the caterpillar who, by the way, finally taught her how to control her size by eating different sides of his mushroom. Alice arrives at the Duchess's house, and it is pure, unfiltered chaos.
Just a total mess.
The kitchen is full of smoke. The Duchess is sitting on a stool nursing a baby. The cook is leaning over the fire, stirring a cauldron of soup that has way too much pepper in it. Everyone is sneezing violently except the cook and a large cat sitting on the hearth, grinning from ear to ear.
The Cheshire Cat makes its debut.
Yes. But the environment is terrifying. The cook suddenly starts picking up anything she can reach. Fire irons, saucepans, plates, and violently hurling them at the Duchess and the baby. The Duchess takes no notice, and the baby is howling.
And when Alice begs them to be careful,
The Duchess grunts. If everybody minded their own business, the world would go round a deal faster than it does.
but the most crucial part of the Duchess's character, and this comes out even more when she reunites with Alice later in the story, is her absolute manic obsession with finding a moral in every single thing.
Oh, yeah.
Alice will say something simple, and the Duchess will instantly reply, and the moral of that is.
We really need to unpack that because it goes to the heart of what Dodgson was rebelling against. In the 19th century, children's books weren't meant to be fun.
No, they were strict, terrifying lectures disguised as stories.
Like what?
Books like Struwwelpeter feature children literally burning to death because they played with matches, or having their thumbs cut off by a tailor with giant scissors because they wouldn't stop sucking them. Every story had a blunt, violent moral.
So Carroll creates the Duchess as a grotesque parody of those authors and parents. She forces moral lessons onto completely meaningless or violent situations. At one point she tells Alice, "'Tis love that makes the world go round."
Right.
And Alice thinks to herself that earlier, the Duchess said the world would go round faster if people minded their own business. The morals contradict each other. They are just empty platitudes adults use to sound authoritative.
Exactly. Carroll is violently mocking the idea that children's literature needs to be a pulpit. The Duchess even sings a lullaby to the baby, giving it a violent shake at the end of every verse.
It's awful.
Speak roughly to your little boy and beat him when he sneezes. He only does it to annoy, because he knows it teases. Carroll is taking this sentimental, idealized Victorian view of motherhood and revealing the harsh, punitive reality that often lay beneath it.
The Duchess tosses the baby to Alice and runs off to get ready to play croquet with the Queen. Alice takes the baby outside, thinking they'll murder it if she leaves it there. But as she carries it, the baby keeps grunting. She looks at its face, and its nose is turning into a snout.
Its eyes are getting small.
It turns into a literal pig. Alice sets it down, and it trots off into the wood. She thinks to herself, it would have made a dreadfully ugly child, but it makes rather a handsome pig.
Which is such a deeply cynical, hilarious observation. But it frees her to continue her journey. She wanders into the wood and encounters the Cheshire Cat sitting on a branch. And this conversation is the philosophical linchpin of the entire book.
Alex asks him which way she ought to go. The cat says that depends a good deal on where you want to get to. Alice says she doesn't much care where, so long as she gets somewhere. And the cat gives that iconic response.
Oh, you're sure to do that if you only walk long enough.
It is flawless logic applied to a meaningless situation.
The cat then tells her that in one direction lives a hatter and in the other lives a March hare. Visit either you like. They're both mad. Alice, clinging to her Victorian sensibilities, says she doesn't want to go among mad people.
And here, the cat delivers the ultimate thesis of Wonderland.
Oh, you can't help that, said the cat. We're all mad here. I'm mad. You're mad.
Alice naturally challenges him. How do you know I'm mad? The cat replies, you must be, or you wouldn't have come here. Then he attempts to prove his own madness.
How does he do that?
He says a dog growls when it's angry and wags its tail when it's pleased. Now I growl when I'm pleased and wag my tail when I'm angry, therefore I'm mad. Alice says she calls it purring, not growling. The cat says call it what you like.
What Carroll is suggesting through the cat is that madness is simply a deviation from the accepted behavioral norms. If the system itself is absurd, if the world you live in demands you run in caucus races and dodge flying saucepans, the only way to navigate it is to accept its inherent madness.
You can't fight it with logic.
Trying to remain sane and logical in an insane world will only break you.
Which perfectly sets up her arrival at the Mad Tea Party. Alice arrives at the March Hare's house. The table is laid out under a tree. The March Hare, the Hatter, and a Dormouse are sitting there, crowded together at one corner of this massive table, resting their elbows on the sleeping Dormouse.
And when they see Alice coming,
They cry out, no room, no room.
Alice indignantly says there's plenty of room and sits down in a large armchair. The social hostility is palpable instantly. They offer her wine, but there is no wine.
So rude.
She says it wasn't very civil to offer it, and the Hare retorts it wasn't very civil of her to sit down without being invited. They then proceed to bombard her with nonsense logic and riddles.
Including the most famous riddle in literary history, why is a raven like a writing desk? Alice is excited to play, saying she thinks she can guess it. The Hare asks, do you mean that you think you can find out the answer to it? Alice says, exactly so.
And then
The Hare says, then you should say what you mean. Alice replies, I do. At least I mean what I say. That's the same thing, you know?
Right. And the Hatter immediately shuts her down. Not the same thing a bit. You might just as well say that I see what I eat is the same thing as I eat what I see. It is a brilliant linguistic trap.
It totally is.
They're using strict, unyielding logical syntax, but applying it to complete nonsense, which completely disorients Alice. Dodgson the logician is having a field day here, showing how grammar can be structurally sound while conveying absolute zero meaning.
But the real tragedy of the Tea Party is the concept of time. The Hatter asks what day of the month it is, looking at a watch that tells the day of the month, but not what o'clock it is. Alice points out that's a funny watch.
The Hatter replies, does your watch tell you what year it is? Alice says no, because it stays the same year for such a long time. The Hatter says, which is just the case with mine. Again, impeccable logic leading to an absurd conclusion.
The Hatter then explains that he offended time, whom he refers to as a literal person, a him, at a great concert given by the Queen of Hearts. He was singing, and the Queen yelled that he was murdering the time and ordered his head cut off. Ever since then, time won't do a thing, the Hatter asks.
It is always 6 o'clock.
It's always tea time. They don't even have time to wash the dishes, so they just keep moving around the table as the cups get dirty. Think about what this represents, an eternal tea party. It sounds whimsical until you realize it is a frozen social ritual.
A nightmare.
I compare it to being trapped in a never-ending networking event, or a Zoom call where the host forgot an agenda and no one knows how to hang up. You are forced to make polite small talk forever, surrounded by dirty dishes, and no one is actually getting nourished.
That detail really highlights the sheer exhaustion of Victorian etiquette, its social obligation divorced from any actual human connection. Alice finally reaches her breaking point with their rudeness. She gets up and walks away in disgust, looking back just in time to see the Hatter and the Hare trying to stuff the dormouse into the teapot.
It's the stupidest tea party I ever was at in all my life, she declares.
Exactly.
And right then, she notices a tree with a door in it. She walks in, and she's back in the long hall with the glass table. But this time, she knows the mechanics of the system. She unlocks the door, uses the pieces of mushroom she kept in her pocket to shrink down to a foot high, and finally, she walks into the beautiful garden she wanted to reach since chapter 1.
But the beautiful garden is not the paradise she imagined. It is the domain of the Queen of Hearts. And this is where Carroll scales up his critique from social etiquette to political tyranny. We are introduced to a system completely devoid of justice or reason.
Alice walks in and immediately sees 3 gardeners shaped like playing cards, the 2, 5, and 7 of spades. And they are frantically painting white roses red.
Alice asks why.
The 2 explains they planted a white rose tree by mistake, and if the queen finds out, she'll have their heads cut off. Before they can finish, the queen's procession arrives. The queen sees the white roses, points at the gardeners, and shouts the iconic line, "Off with their heads."
It is power entirely untethered from proportion. The punishment for landscaping error is decapitation. Alice actually hides the gardeners in a flower pot, and the executioners just pretend they've chopped their heads off, which shows that the system runs on the appearance of compliance rather than actual results.
The queen then asks Alice if she plays croquet and drags her to the pitch. And this croquet ground is the stuff of absolute nightmares.
The pitch is full of ridges and furrows. The mallets are live flamingos. The balls are live hedgehogs. And the hoops are soldiers doubling themselves over and standing on their hands and feet.
Let's connect this vividly to modern life. Have you ever been in a situation, maybe a massive project at work, or trying to navigate a complex health insurance bureaucracy, where the tools you're given actively fight against you?
Constantly.
Alice tries to swing the flamingo, and it twists its long neck back and looks her directly in the face. She goes to hit the hedgehog, and it unrolls and walks away. And the soldiers acting as hoops keep getting up and moving to other parts of the ground.
The goalposts literally get up and walk away. The players all play at once without waiting for turns, quarreling all the while. The queen is in a furious passion, stamping about, shouting off with his head, about once a minute.
It's impossible.
Alice realizes it is an impossible system to win. There are no rules, or if there are, nobody attends to them. It perfectly mimics the feeling of being trapped in an organization run by a volatile, unpredictable leader where the metrics for success change depending on their mood.
The Cheshire Cat's head appears in the sky, and Alice complains to him about the unfairness of the game. The king notices the cat, doesn't like the look of it, and calls the queen, who immediately orders it beheaded. But this creates an incredible paradox for the executioner.
The executioner argues that you can't cut off a head unless there is a body to cut it off from. He says he's never had to do such a thing before, and he's not going to begin at his time of life. The king argues that anything that has a head can be beheaded, and that the executioner is talking nonsense.
And what does the queen say?
The queen argues that if something isn't done about it in less than no time, she'll have everybody executed all around. It is a brilliant, hilarious illustration of how logic and practical reality completely break down in the face of absolute tyranny.
This breakdown of reality reaches its absolute peak in the final act. We arrive back at the court for a trial. The Knave of Hearts is in chains, guarded by soldiers. The White Rabbit is the herald. In the middle of the room is a table with a large dish of tarts. The charge is that the Knave of Hearts stole the tarts.
Alice looks at the jury, which is composed of 12 animals, including Bill the Lizard. They're all writing busily on slates. Alice asks the Griffin what they are doing before the trial has even begun. The Griffin whispers that they are writing down their own names for fear they should forget them before the end of the trial.
Alice says loudly, "Stupid things!" And the jury immediately writes down stupid things on their slates. Alice notices Bill the Lizard's pencil is squeaking, so she sneaks up behind him and takes it away.
Poor Bill.
Bill, unable to find it, is forced to write with his finger for the rest of the day, which leaves no mark on the slate. It is a razor-sharp mockery of performative documentation. The act of writing is more important to the bureaucracy than what is actually being recorded.
The trial proceeds with a complete disregard for due process. The first witness is the Hatter, who is so terrified of the Queen, he bites a large chunk out of his teacup instead of his bread and butter. His testimony is a string of incomplete, nonsensical sentences.
He's a mess.
The king dismisses him, and the Queen orders his head cut off outside, but he runs away too fast. Then the cook testifies, making everyone seize with pepper, and she escapes in the chaos. And then the White Rabbit calls the next witness, Alice.
Now, something crucial has been happening to Alice during this trial. She has begun to grow again. By the time her name is called, she is quite large. She jumps up in such a hurry, she knocks over the jury box with the edge of her skirt, spilling all the animals onto the floor.
She frantically puts them back, apologizing.
The king demands she tell what she knows about the case. Alice says nothing. The king says, "That's very important." The White Rabbit interrupts, suggesting he means unimportant. The king mumbles important, unimportant, as if trying which word sounds best, and the jury writes down whatever they hear.
It shows that truth is entirely subjective to the whims of the powerful. Then the king tries to use a newly invented law to get rid of her. He reads from his notebook, Rule 42. All persons more than a mile high to leave the court.
Alice realizes he just made it up on the spot and bluntly refuses to leave.
The White Rabbit then produces a piece of paper. It's a set of verses. The knave denies writing it, pointing out it isn't signed. The king says that makes it worse, proving he had a mischievous intention. The Queen declares this proves his guilt.
Alice demands they read it, and the poem is absolute glorious nonsense. It's grammatically sound, but devoid of meaning. "They told me you had been to her and mentioned me to him. She gave me a good character, but said I could not swim."
Yet the king seizes upon it as hard evidence. He finds a line that says, "I gave her 1, they gave him 2, and triumphantly points at the tarts on the table and says, there they are. Nothing can be clearer than that."
Confirmation bias at its finest.
It is the ultimate display of confirmation bias. The authority figure takes a piece of meaningless data and forcefully interprets it to support his preconceived conclusion.
The king tells the jury to consider their verdict, and the Queen delivers the most famous, terrifying line of the book. No, sentence first, verdict afterwards.
Execute them first, figure out if they are guilty later. It is the absolute collapse of justice and reason. The mask of the system has completely fallen off.
Alice, who has now grown to her full normal size, completely rejects this madness. Stuff and nonsense, she says loudly. The idea of having the sentence first. The Queen turns purple and screams off with her head. But nobody moves. Alice stands tall and delivers the line that shatters the entire illusion. "Who cares for you? You're nothing but a pack of cards."
This is the pivotal moment of waking up. The system's power over Alice relied entirely on her willingness to play by its rules, to shrink herself down, to fear the Queen, and to believe in its reality.
By asserting her true size, her true self, and recognizing the authority figures for what they actually are, just flat, fragile pieces of paper, she breaks the spell entirely.
The whole pack of cards rises up into the air and flies down upon her. She gives a little scream, half of fright and half of anger, and tries to beat them off. Wait, she tries to beat them off, and suddenly she finds herself lying on the bank, her head in her sister's lap.
The dead leaves are fluttering down upon her face. The dream is over.
It is a profound realization to end on. The terrifying, omnipotent Queen, the chaotic systems, the arbitrary rules, they hold no real power the moment you refuse to legitimize them.
Alice runs off to have her tea, but her sister remains on the bank. And she does something beautiful. She grounds the magic in reality. The rattling teacups from the dream are just the tinkling sheep bells in the distance. The Queen's cries are just the voice of the shepherd boy. The grunting of the pig baby is the noises of the farmyard.
And she pictures Alice as a grown woman, keeping the simple and loving heart of her childhood, gathering other children around her, telling them the strange tale of Wonderland.
It's a wonderful sentiment.
It is Carroll's ultimate wish for his creation, that she survives the rigid, chaotic adult world without losing her wonder or her ability to question absurdity.
So we've traced how a brilliant, stuttering mathematician took the strict, dogmatic rules of his Victorian life and flipped them upside down. He created a masterpiece about navigating chaos, about what happens when logic fails, and about the courage it takes to stand up to an absurd system.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. When you encounter a system in your own life that feels completely illogical, a workplace where the flamingos are twisting their necks, a bureaucracy that demands you run in circles for a thimble, or a social circle where the rules change daily, do you exhaust yourself trying to play by those impossible rules? Or do you step back, realize you're dealing with a pack of cards, and rewrite the game entirely?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Remember to look for the rabbit holes of wonder in your own daily life. And don't be afraid to ask the caterpillar who you really are. We'll catch you next time.